busyness is always the greatest enemy of the spiritual life, right?
This is not good fences make good neighbors. It's good fences make you a better neighbor.
It invited me to not just put the boundary, but how do I see this in a creative way?
This is Pod Strangely Warmed, a place where we tell the good Methodist story, where we have conversations that invite followers of Jesus to seek after that loving, just, and free world that God imagines for us all, and have a little fun along the way. Hey, Pod Strangely Warm family, welcome back. We are in the Fort Worth office this week, back to the original studio. It feels like old home week, not just because we're back here in Fort Worth, but because Reverend Kristin Warthen is with us here on the podcast this week. And today we're joined by Reverend Betsy Godbold. Thank you so much for being here, Betsy. Today, our conversation is intended to be kind of a follow-up to last week. We had Hesha Abrams on the podcast last week, inviting us to hold the calm and giving us some helpful tools for resolving conflict, both in our interpersonal lives, but also within the church. And I know this will be a surprise that conflict happens within church. It never shocking, never actually happens. Well, but as I reflected on that, I came to the realization that a lot of the work that Hesha does invites us into the table in that holding of the calm space, with the assumption that as we do so, we're doing so in a kind of a spiritually healthy, mentally healthy kind of peaceful place that allows us to hold the calm for somebody else. And I don't know about you, but as we look around our world today, we've got a lot of stressing outside influences that might make that spiritual health, that mental health, a little more of a struggle than it might otherwise be. And so to help us continue in that work of being who God is inviting us to be, both in conflict and not, I hope we'll have a conversation today connected to how do we cultivate our own faith formation, our own spiritual health and well-being in a time in which the doom scroll is all too present and all too real, in a time in which we are experiencing societal upheaval and change and all the reactions that come with that, both the celebration and the heartbreak and the struggle and the new and the hard and every bit of that. I'm thankful to both of you because now I just get to not talk and y'all are going to carry the rest of this for the next 30 minutes.
We need you along with us.
Okay. We'll do it together. We'll do it together. But before we get to the fullness of that conversation, let's just take a minute to introduce to our Pod Strangely Warm family. Betsy, this is your first time with us on the podcast, and you've brought some stuff that is kind of connected to who you are and represents a part of you. What did you bring with us today?
Okay, and these get into probably the practices that we'll do later.
Perfect.
But I brought a couple of bookmarks that I do, some rocks. Some of them are small, some are large.
Yeah.
And then one of my favorite things, because Kristin mentioned she was bringing a singing bowl. And I'm not to be outdone. So I brought this wonderful, beautiful pot lid.
Right.
And I think it represents me in many ways.
Okay.
Because it's kind of dinged up. And I don't really have a lot of dents, so that's good. It's been repurposed. And I feel like I've been repurposed and more than a few times and transformed. And sometimes as we get older, rather than being discarded, which I think sometimes we tend to do with our older population, I happen to be in, and but they become richer and deeper. Yeah. And you'll hear that in a minute.
Okay. Can you give us just a hint and a preview for those who aren't familiar with what a singing bowl is or does, and the fact that a pot lid might be one? Yeah, just give us a couple minutes of unpacking it.
Should we actually show them what a singing bowl is, a normal singing bowl? Maybe or maybe not.
Well, sure. I think Kristin might actually have one, right?
Yeah, I brought my singing bowl, and the reason I brought it is because of the topic at hand. And the interesting thing about me and the singing bowl is I'm not great with it. I'll start out with that. I'm not great with the singing bowl, but I find that I am better with it when I am the most gracious with myself, when I am not trying to make it sing is usually when I can make it sing best, when I just kind of give in to the process. And so we'll see if I can accomplish that today. But a singing bowl is simply that. It is a bowl that sings. And so we tap it, and it makes that noise. And the way we keep it going Oops, see, I can't do it today.
Get it right.
Yeah, stay with the angle. I'm not getting it today, y'all.
And that's okay.
That's all right. I'm just going to have to learn to be gracious with myself. But when you run the wand around it, it can pick up the resonance. Sometimes I can get it back up, but it'll pick up the resonance and sing for you. Really good spiritual leaders can get this really easily, and mine always takes me a while. That's why it's a practice.
I was talking with my church the other day. Spiritual practice is a practice on purpose,
That's
right?
right.
It's like the practice of medicine. It is not perfect anytime, but it is on a journey toward perfection. Yeah. Betsy, you were showing us how yours worked this morning, and this pot lid will make an incredible kind of sound. Can you demonstrate that for us?
I got this from a very dear friend. The mallet, or I'm not sure what we actually call this, mallet.
Mallet works for me.
Anyway, when I got it, it was a chair stopper, I think, on the end of a stick, which I gave to a friend. But so now I have this, which is, yes.
Very good.
It works. So for this one, as I said, it can be as older, we get richer. And you can do it faster to make or slower. But as you get in with that, you can sit and begin to center with that deep resonant tone that just brings you in for me. And I can center, as Kristin said, as you the less you try, the easier it gets.
Yeah.
And I've seen some extremely expensive singing bowls, but to me, this is one of the richest. I have several, but I love this.
Very good.
So,
Well, and its invitation is to that place of peace, right? It creates the space that almost I've never operated a singing bowl before, and I'm not even going to try today because failing in public is not my favorite thing to do.
You think I like it?
I don't know. But that invitation to peace, both in the sound and the resonance of it, but also in the simple rhythmic act of stirring the circle, right? I'm sure there's a more technical term for it, but brings us to that place of peace. And I love that y'all both have brought those today, because in this world where everything feels like it's spinning toward anxiety, toward fear, toward uncertainty, toward, all the things that push us from spiritual and mental and emotional health, intentionally choosing center, choosing peace is, I think, a huge first step, right?
Yeah.
You don't pick up a pot lid and say, I'm going to make this thing sing without some intentionality, right? That's not, we've all dropped one and had it clang at our house before. But the difference between that, which is a moment of hectic anxiety, anger, frustration, energy, and peace is very much a difference in intentionality. As we unpack this a little more, what are some practices in the midst of this season of our lives that have proven helpful for you for kind of maintaining that place of peace, or drawing yourself back as we get drawn away from it?
That's a good question, Daniel. I almost want to back us up.
Okay.
Right? Like, what are the things that are yanking you into chaos?
Fair.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, so that really is my question. Like, what are the things that are yanking you into chaos?
Well, I think in this time, busyness is always the greatest enemy of the spiritual life, right? And so, but that's not unique to this season, but it's an ever-present thing in our kind of results-oriented, American culture, right? That is like, if you're not winning, you're losing kind of thing, that zero-sum idea. And so hurry and busyness can pull us away from that. The chaos of this season of our shared communal lives, right? And the reactionary space that we live in, whether it's on our favorite cable news network, no matter what the cable news network is, or in the doom scroll on our phone, right? That space that kind of can pull us out, right? You can get sucked in and realize I've killed an hour, and all I have seen is the world's going to poo in this way or this way or this way or this way or this way. And you never feel better at the end of that than you did at the beginning, right? And so those are at least some of the things. What do you guys experience as things that kind of pull us from peace toward needing to return there in this time?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm like you, certainly busyness and the doom scroll. And even when you go there thinking there being whatever your social media is, right? Go TikTok, go to Facebook, go to X, go to, whatever, Blue Sky, wherever you're hanging out these days, right? Even if you go there thinking, I'm going to watch some funny videos. This is great, right? I send funny videos to Dustin all the time. You can lose an hour and realize I saw one or two funny things, but I'm mostly really mad right now. I'm really ticked off at the world. So those are the things that pull me, and that frustration tends to capitalize on like the normal day-to-day frustration. I've got to pick up kids because Catherine's car broke down. It is not, thankfully, but I've got to pick up kids, or I've got to go to this meeting and then that meeting, and I need to put this stuff together for that group over here, and I've still got to write this sermon eventually, right? Like
Sunday's always coming.
Right, Sunday's always coming, and so like this kind of manufactured anger and anxiety and frustration capitalizes on my normal stresses and anxieties. Yeah. And so those are the things that pull me in. What about you? What's it look like as retired clergy?
I think I have many of the same. One of mine is the shoulds. Still.
Yeah.
I should be doing this, or I should be doing that. It's not that I have to do it.
Right.
And I love my slow mornings now that I, even like today when this was a morning thing, sometimes I don't do morning things because that's my time to sit and be.
Yeah.
And as Richard Rohr says, I think he's at a stage and he just gazes. So what pulls me in? Yeah, we have the phone, we have the thing.
Right.
I have several games, and I try to be very intentional in my time. If I'm going to do that, then I try to allow myself a certain amount of time. Doesn't always work.
Right.
It's amazing how addictive that little screen is, and how it pulls us away. And, it's that forever we've known what we put in here, comes out in other ways. So, the phone, not the scrolling so much for me, but there are those little things. And so I try to limit myself to a 10-minute listening or reading, let's say what it is, of news.
Okay.
This is what's happened.
Yeah.
That's it for the day.
Okay. So there's a boundary.
Definitely. I try very hard, but without being able to sit in the morning and center and really be very intentional in clearing everything out, that doesn't work. Those boundaries can easily... I become more reactive.
Okay. Yeah.
Rather than reflective.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And if you're anything like me, your first reaction is never the thing you want. Right?
Yeah.
Like your first reaction to something is, for me, as I process things that I don't like, I'm an Enneagram 9. The emotion that I am so familiar with and that scares me the most is my anger, right? Yeah. And I'm an 8-wing, so pair that. That's fun, right? And so my first reaction to things that are out of my control are I'm mad about it. right? I already named that. I get mad about it really
Yeah.
easy. And so if I don't take some time to set a boundary or to process or to center, then the reaction will take over, right?
Yeah.
And so the point of centering and the point of getting that boundary, I wish mine was 10 minutes. I am so envious of that. I'm going to strive for that.
Do it? No. I mean,
But it's the anticipation. It's the goal.
It's the goal.
Oh, man.
It's the goal.
What a
But
great
that's
striving.
So, but the reactionary, that's that lizard brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't stop. And if we could just breathe into that for a moment and teach ourselves.
Yeah.
We have a great tool right here. And people, you've seen me do this numerous times. But when we're there, if we can, I used to say before I go over the hill and down, what do I do? And I think I've learned, or I have in my tool bag at least, these 10 fingers that can remind me to pause, P-A-U-S-E. Changes everything.
Yeah. The power of 10 intentional seconds in that moment.
I love that, 10 intentional seconds. But the intentionality of putting that in place and the awareness doesn't take away the curiosity of life, of wanting to be engaged, but how do we engage?
Yeah. Well, and how much we've had so many little nuggets that we could spend 30 minutes unpacking each one of these nuggets that I just want to circle back and make sure people aren't missing this, right? The power of intention, the power of boundaries, right? Like the intentional centering as a place of beginning, the placing of boundaries, even if we're imperfect in the living of them, right? And the power of focus, right? Kristin, as you were naming, the image that kept coming to my mind of how the doom scroll and the kind of the anxiety of the system that keeps our attention, right? Like it's designed to keep us drawn in, right? The best way to keep us through a commercial break is through fear, anxiety, or anger, right? And so a lot of the programming is designed in that kind of way, but it's taken your baseline, things that would normally cause frustration, anxiety, anger, etc., and it's moving you from a 3 to a 9.
Yeah.
Right? And
not the peace-filled Enneagram 9.
Well, no, not the keep the peace 9, but the world is being burned down 9, right? The burn it all down. But what I hear in the intentional centering is a place of beginning and the placing of boundaries and the power of focus, right? We didn't name it as such, but it's really the power of focus, right? Have a chance to move that 9 back down to a 3. And maybe even take our baseline 3 and move it to a 2 or to a 1, right? So that we're better able to engage. Because every one of those church meetings doesn't go exactly according to its best endeavors, because you're not the only human who's showing up with a 3 that's been taken to a 9, right? We are all humans showing up in places together. As we think about this, that focus piece, we're in the middle of Proverbs right now in the Bible study I lead, and how one of the main things that we just finished working through is the power and place of, as if we're seeking after wisdom, we must pay real attention to what our eyes see, right? And where our focus is, where is our gaze set upon, right? Is our gaze set upon a thing that will help us cultivate that wisdom, or is our gaze set upon the thing that's going to cultivate anger, right? And functionally, that's a boundary too, right? It's a what am I going to put in place to make sure that I'm physically or spiritually ready for what is ahead of me, right? Yeah. One of the things that is the cause of tension for many folks is kind of our shared political life and journey. And in the nature of our shared political life and journey is that in any given time, half the country is super excited and half the country is super angry. And there's really not much of a difference between the two. One of my encouragements for my folks, because that can be both a place of the doom scroll and is to be very intentional about setting a boundary there. No matter if your favorite channel is Fox or MSNBC or CNN or Newsmax or whatever, put that boundary in place, right? What does that say? I'm only going to give X amount of my time to this so that my heart is not solely formed, right? I had a good Presbyterian preacher friend of mine. We were both serving in a similar community, and we were talking about kind of how ineffectual our sermons were or seemed to be. And he's like, look, give yourself some credit. You at best get 30 minutes, right, in a given week. Whatever the news channel of choice is for many of our folks can get 40 hours, right? In 30 minutes versus 40 hours, or 30 minutes versus 30 hours, right? And that was actually the epicenter of my intentional inviting of folks to say, put a boundary, like put a limitation in place so that whether it's, celebration in the nanny boo boo form, which is what happens when you're in power, right? Or the anger, frustration, and sadness that is when you feel disempowered, right? And you feel subject to the power of the other. There's a limitation on how much of your soul that can take a hold on.
Yeah. Well, and to be clear, right? So it's funny that we shift into talking about boundaries, because I'm in the middle of a sermon series where that is exactly what I'm preaching on this week.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
And we're using the story of Jethro going to Moses and telling Moses, total layman's terms. So this is Kristin's translation
New
of
Revised
Exodus.
Kristin version.
Yeah, the New Revised Kristin version. Jethro goes to Moses and is like, dude, what are you doing? You're trying to carry it all. This is not yours to do. You need to appoint some folks to help you, and theirs is to settle all the small disputes and to bring the big ones to you. Yours is to mediate with God for these people, right? Yours is to be with God for these people. And when you put this into place and you share the load, then we can all move toward happiness. And so there's a couple of things in this story that I really appreciate. And one of them, besides Jethro telling Moses, you cannot do or be everything. The other one of those is that Moses' boundaries dictate Moses' behavior. Jethro doesn't say, tell these folks that when they do this, you're going to do this. No.
Yeah.
Right? That when you do this, they better do this. That's not what Jethro says. Jethro says, this is what is yours to do. And so good boundaries dictate our behavior when people try to cross them. They don't dictate other people's behaviors, right? This is not good fences make good neighbors. It's good fences make you a better neighbor, right?
Yeah.
And so to understand that these boundaries that we put in place, they're for us.
Right.
What are the rules and guides that dictate how you will show up in any given situation, right?
I had a conversation on Sunday. I think it was Saturday, Sunday. And it invited me to not just put the boundary, but how do I see this in a creative way? A reframing, if you will. Case in point, not to get too terribly political here, but Bishop Buddy.
Yeah.
The individual I was talking to said, well, that was expected for her. I mean, that was a normal, traditional thing we would say. And knowing what the reaction is going to be.
Right.
Was there a more creative way to have done that? And that has really stopped me to say,
Yeah.
Because when I say certain things, am I aware, even with that boundary, if you will, am I aware that that's already going to stir a reaction in you that may not be positive? So was there a different way? I commend the courage and
Absolutely.
for me.
Yeah.
Speaking for me, that's my truth. But was there a creative way that could have flipped that, that took a certain individual or individuals that reacted in a negative to react even in maybe not a positive but a neutral way?
Right.
To reimagine, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
So that may even be way out of it. But I think sometimes we're so, that again, reactive. We're listening to respond.
Right. Yeah.
We don't listen most of the time.
Yeah. Well, and listening, seeking understanding, like who, not only what is being said, but who is speaking and why, where is that coming from? And, because that informs a response, not a reaction, right? Kristin, as you were sharing, I was struck, the boundary making you a better neighbor. What Jethro is saving Moses from is one of the other things that can ramp our 3 to a 9 is our impulse towards overfunctioning, right? That impulse toward, and we haven't named that so far as one of the things that can be one of our spiritual struggles, right? One of the things that gets in the way of our spiritual health, but it's an offshoot of that busyness and hurry, right? That over functioning.
Yeah,
right?
those are all of Betsy's shoulds.
Right. That's the
right.
Well, and shoulds make for great piles of other things that start with sh, but we won't quite fully complete that around here.
You don't, should anyway.
You don't should all over yourself. I'll say it. I'm sorry, Bishop. You just
Okay.
shouldn't should all over yourself.
It's manure. It's bad stuff.
That's where we grow.
Yeah.
Indeed.
With the questions
Yeah.
and the shoulds, maybe, or take the shoulds out.
Yeah.
So the impulse here, I think, is to an intentional, reflective engagement with neighbor, with ourself, with God. Is there something specifically? I mean, we've named some general practices here, right? That has been particularly meaningful for your soul, either in this specific moment of history or a particularly trying season of life that you can. One of the joys Jesus invites us to remember, and right, one of the great joys of remembering is we get dropped back in that moment, and we can re-experience God's faithfulness in the midst of that act of remembering. Is there something that has been particularly meaningful either for this time or looking back?
There are a couple of things for me in this season of life that have been really life-giving. One is that I am, since my days of teaching, right out of college, my habit has been to get out of bed, feet on the ground, go. And go until I feel like I'm done for the day. And sometimes that's 4 p.m., but more often than not, that's somewhere around 9:30. And it's go, 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 go. So what has been really life-giving for me in this season is I have stopped. In the morning, the very first thing I do, and I know it doesn't sound like a spiritual practice, but it is, the very first thing I do is take a huge drink of water and then go take my vitamins and change into yoga clothes and go do yoga.
Okay.
And that starts my day. And it's slow and it's intentional. Yoga usually offers me a word for the day. Today it's play.
Okay, cool.
So 2 days ago it was gaze. So that's why I kind of sat up a little straighter when you said that. But it gives me kind of a word to carry with me through the day. Before I do yoga, I light my candle and I invite God to be with me in that space, trusting that God is with me in that space. That yoga is not just something I'm doing for my body, I'm doing it for my spirit and for my mind, and God moves and calms me in that time. The other thing I do is you've seen me on the podcast, I'm usually wearing some kind of a t-shirt that says something about where I am in life. I'm not today, but I am wearing my watch, right? And so my watch band reminds me on the daily, and I know you can't necessarily zoom into this, but I'm going to share it anyways. When I get discouraged, I take off my watch and I just lay it down in front of me because on the inside of my watch band, it says, "Your life matters." And it just reminds me that the things that I do, whether I see what's happening or not, matters. And that includes how I show up with and for others. And so just that reminder has become a spiritual practice. Like when we talk about our spiritual practices, I think we oftentimes immediately go to, I need 50 more minutes in prayer and Bible study, and I need to read, X number of verses a day. And the reminder is that God is with us at all times. It's not about reading 7 more chapters of Proverbs today. It's about simply being with the one in whom you live and move and have your being. And what are the things that connect you with the divine? So that's me right now. Betsy, what are you up to these days?
Well, I think, and I want to go back a bit because I think we sometimes miss some of this because we haven't gotten a really positive grasp of who we are as God's beloved.
Yeah.
And if we don't have that, and we haven't gotten that, then we're going to be working out of that place of insecurity, I think.
Yeah.
We'll swallow every storm that comes along,
Yep.
Oh, what an image.
dance with the chaos, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
I think it's easier when we are truly grounded in that essence of knowing
Yeah.
that we are God's beloved. And for me, I had to start there
Yeah.
because there were too many years that I was just blowing and going
Yeah.
to prove that I was something.
Right.
So it was out of the doing, not out of the being, that God invites all us in from the very beginning.
Yeah.
My practice is there's an app for this, Pray As You Go.
Okay. Yeah.
I've used that for years. I'll start with that, and then I have my timer set, so I get the Pray As You Go is usually 12 minutes,
Okay.
but it gives me it gives me music.
Yep.
It gives me scripture, so it keeps me grounded in that. It gives me for a few questions for reflections,
Yeah.
and then I just go into a 20-minute sit out of that.
Okay.
Another practice I have is putting leaves on a river. This has been so prevalent. I mean, it is just feeding me right now. And I've had a couple of incidences where there are people that just drive me nuts.
Say what? What?
People don't do that.
There's one
We
in
love all people.
particular, and every time this person would walk in a room, I would just become, I mean, it was like she just took the air out for me.
Yeah.
Of course, I was allowing that. The practice I have is a stream, and it's in Colorado.
Okay.
It's up near Bear Lake, Estes Park, and I could go there in a second now. And this stream, they're aspens, it's cool.
Yeah.
You can hear the leaves.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
And I put those concerns or people on a leaf. I was doing this for a number of years before the stream went around a bend. There was a waterfall. And suddenly those leaves that I had things that of concerns or people were on that waterfall. Just recently, in this individual I was dealing with, and I sat with it a lot too, and what was it? And I think there were some triggers from early childhood
Okay.
that this person brought to me.
Yeah.
Again, it's that intentionality, trying to go there. What is this?
Yeah.
Breathe into that feeling. And it was very interesting. And in one of these meditations, this particular individual was on a leaf, and went around the bend and the waterfall. It hesitated for just a second, and they went over. And I could see them. I can be around that individual now with absolutely no concerns.
Yeah.
It has amazed me again of how these tools work
Yeah.
when we let them. But that one, the leaves on the river, are just, that's such a big tool for me
Yeah.
of letting things go. Just being, letting the leaves. And then recently, I became a leaf. My leaf was gold. But there were other leaves that began to join me. And as we joined, the colors blended. It was beautiful. As they would come over and touch, I would become a little more bronze or gold, reddish.
Okay.
They would become a little more gold. So those are the sort of, I mean, that's, this consciousness. But when I'm in that place, I could stay there all day.
Yeah.
That is so fast. So Tuesday morning, I've been leading our women's Bible study, and we have a woman who brings her mother. Her mother's, she's in her 90s. And she is a gem. She's a gem. Listen, I love Miss Evelyn. She's always, listen, you're just a little girl. And I love it. I will take being a little girl in Miss Evelyn's eyes any day of the week. But so her daughter brings her in, and she is fixated. She said, Pastor, I've got an issue I need you to help me with. And I thought, oh my goodness, I was very concerned. Like, what is going on? And she said, I have these 7 leaves on an oak tree that just won't come off of the tree. And I said, what do you mean? And she says, the whole tree's dead. I've got 7 leaves that just won't go anywhere. I'll bring you a picture. And sure enough, Tuesday when she came to pick up Miss Evelyn, she brought me a picture. And so I'm listening to you talk about these leaves, and now I can't help but find myself wondering, like, what is in those leaves that won't let go of that tree?
Right?
There's some power in that reflection, right?
Yeah. Well, I love that you invited us at the beginning piece, because I think for so many people, what you named in your own struggle of claiming and remembering that belovedness, right? That just, I am loved with a period at the end. It was Richard Rohr who introduced me to the Enneagram, right? And part of what it made vivid and clear was, the lie that I'd spent 30 years at that point in my life living under, right? That still is the voice that we have to swat away, is I am loved when, right? And for each of us is different, right? The fill in the blank varies.
Mine's a question mark.
Oh.
I'm loved.
Mine's I'm loved when I'm successful. That main character energy, it manifests in that kind of way, right? But getting rid of the when, right? And just putting a period or even an exclamation mark, right? We don't need a question mark there. We need to, as a place of beginning, right? And trusting in that, not just saying it, but trusting in it.
And what does trusting mean for you?
Yeah.
Oh, she's asking.
She is. I know. I think it's more that it's having it move from the head to the soul, right? We can know it in our head, but knowing that we know that we know that we know.
It's detaching from an outcome, possibly, too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Getting away from, it's the win, right? It's truly losing the win. So that it's not just I'm successful or I'm loved. Talk about Freudian slip. I am loved when, right? So we've had an amazing conversation. We're probably toward the end of our given time today. If you had one thing that if people heard nothing else today that you wanted them to kind of hear as we kind of bring this home, what is the one thing you'd want folks to hold on to coming out of this episode today?
I'm going to do what I don't normally do, and that is position it in the negative.
Okay.
You cannot be or do everything. So do what is yours and yours alone to do.
Yeah.
Amen.
Breathe deeply. Move slowly.
Amen. Thank you for joining us today on Pod Strangely Warmed. We hope and pray that your spirit's in a better place now than you were 30 or so minutes ago as we began this conversation. And know that it is our prayer that as we seek to hold the calm, as we seek to work through life, as we seek to be followers of Jesus, seeking after the loving, just, and free world that God imagines not just for some, but for all people, that we might know what is ours to do, and that we might breathe deeply and walk slowly, trusting more fully and completely in the God who made us, the God who loves us, and the God who invites us into this life of becoming that is far from perfect, but is on its way to perfection.
Amen.
Until next time, I'm Daniel Hawkins, and this is Pod Strangely Warmed. This has been Pod Strangely Warmed. If you enjoyed our conversation today, know that you can find us anywhere you find podcasts. On Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, any and all the places, we are there. So if you want to continue the good United Methodist conversation that you've been a part of today, find us, like us, rate us, review us, and share with a friend so that the good news that is happening right here in our own midst can amplify even more.
It's okay. Everybody gets a little weird some days. Hey, it's okay. Everybody feels kind of weird. I should get out of bed. I should probably drink some water. I should, but I know that I'm not gonna do the things statistically that make me feel better.
Get outside and out my mind and I won't feel better. Scrolling through the videos and pictures.
Scrolling till my eyes turn to liquor.
Feeling overstimulated, maybe it's a sign. If I'm here any longer, I'll get tan lines from the brightness. Nothing's really wrong yet. Nothing's really wrong yet.
That would have been something good to broach.
Wrong.
How much do we borrow the anxiety?
Hey, it's okay. Everybody feels kinda weird some days. Hey, it's okay. Everybody feels kinda weird some days. You don't have to try to please nobody. You just gotta try to please your own body. Hey, it's okay.